This is the story of John Davidson Rockefeller, a formidable industry titan who revolutionized the global economic space by building an oil empire worth trillions of dollars. Join us in today's video as we take a close look at the remarkable journey of Rockefeller. The Rockefeller Empire is considered one of the wealthiest empires in the world, with chains of businesses and franchises under its umbrella. It started with one man, John Davidson Rockefeller, the innovator and business mogul who took the right steps, the right risks towards the right direction, birthing wealth that has stood the test of time. Before we look at the empire of Rockefeller, it's important that we take a look at the man who started it all. So who is John Davidson Rockefeller? John Davidson Rockefeller was born on the 8th of July, 1839 in Richford, New York. He lived until the 23rd of May, 1937. He was born to a traveling merchant who identified himself as a botanic physician, but in reality was selling the 19th century equivalent of homeopathic medicine, William Avery Rockefeller, and his mother Eliza, a devout Baptist. John was the second of 6 children and the eldest son. Rockefeller's family rarely stayed in one place for long. They had initially moved to Moravia, New York, and then to Oswego, New York in 1851. He went to Oswego Academy there. In 1851, the family moved to Strongsville, Ohio, a town near Cleveland. John has lived his nomadic lifestyle ever since he was 3 years old. John was naturally a smart individual since childhood. His intelligence was put to good use when the family moved to Cleveland, Ohio in 1854, where he got the chance to attend a proper school and he received an unusually good education for his time. However, less than a year later, John dropped out to work as a bookkeeper at the local produce broker. He got his hands into a lot of tasks, including raising turkeys and doing chores for neighbors to make any money for his survival. 6 years later, Rockefeller started his first business, a commission business that sold hay, grain, meat, and other goods. At 16, he had taken one business class at Folsom Mercantile College and worked as a bookkeeper before starting this business. Frustrated with the low wage rate at the bookstore, he decided not to invest more of his time on the job, more like doing more overtime so he could get more pay. All the money he got, he invested in his business. One of the enviable qualities of this man is his calculated hunger for success. At 16, he already owned a business and was investing all his wages to see it succeed. The business boomed and John made some serious money. He was far from a millionaire though, but he didn't do too bad for an inexperienced teenager. He was only 16, but the banks, impressed with his commercial acumen, were ready to loan him more money. Every bank in Cleveland was begging John to borrow money, and he was barely 18 years old at the time. But then, in 1859, something happened that would change his life forever. Just 100 miles east of Cleveland, the first American oil well had been discovered. This marked the beginning of the Pennsylvania oil rush, and within a year, 4,500 barrels of oil would be produced. Now, how did Rockefeller build the trillion-dollar oil empire? Before we continue, do you know that the first 1,000 people to like this video and subscribe to Old Money Chronicles become millionaires before the year ends? So, what are you waiting for? Smash the like and subscribe button right now. That done? Okay, let's move forward. The discovery of an oil well in Cleveland was all the clue John Rockefeller needed. He grabbed this opportunity tooth and nail and took full advantage of it. Now back then, oil wasn't quite as valuable as it is today. Gasoline cars hadn't been invented yet, but oil could still be processed into kerosene, which people would then use in lamps. John, being a careful observer, realized, however, that the biggest profits to be had weren't in drilling for oil, but refining it. He witnessed many people going bust before striking oil, so he knew that the business was too risky for him. Instead, he let others go through the hassle of finding the oil, and he would just buy it off of them. John had to wait until 1863 for the government to build a rail line connecting the Pennsylvania oil fields to Cleveland, but when that line was built, John was ready for it with a long line of partners and banks ready to back him up. It's been said that in life, opportunities should meet you prepared. John Rockefeller took that pretty personally. He had also assembled a team of seasoned chemists and engineers who not only optimized the refining process, but also discovered various uses for the byproducts of refining petroleum. That was the birth of his first oil refinery, which he built near Cleveland in 1863. This business mogul wasn't about to end there, though. I mean, what do you expect? He had never been a man with a small vision. In 1865, Rockefeller launched out and borrowed some money to buy some of his partners and take control of the refinery. Over the course of the next few years, he acquired new partners and expanded his business in the growing oil industry. The early refineries in Cleveland could only operate at about a 60% efficiency, and John not only increased that percentage, but he also started selling all of the byproducts like paraffin wax, tar, and naphtha. Within 2 years, the Rockefeller refinery was worth over $70,000 and was among the largest in Cleveland, and Rockefeller focused only on the oil business from then on. That was the beginning of the journey of John Davidson Rockefeller into building the trillion-dollar empire. In 1865, there were 26 competing refineries, but within 5 years, John had acquired all but 4 of them. By this point, his business was getting too big to handle as a partnership. The birth of Standard Oil. In 1870, Rockefeller, with his younger brother and a few friends, a group including an American financier, Henry Flagler, incorporated a Standard Oil Company of Ohio, and John Rockefeller was himself the president and the largest shareholder. John hit the market with a clever and open mind. Rockefeller believed in running businesses as cheaply as possible, and Standard Oil quickly became very successful. It started buying out its competitors, and by 1872, it controlled almost all of the oil refineries in Cleveland. To convince the few remaining competitors in Cleveland, John would simply invite them over and show them his books, revealing that he could operate at a loss far longer than they could stay solvent. In exchange for a good buyout price, John would offer his competitors positions in his own company, thus placing the brightest minds in the industry under his control. Of course, not everyone would give up immediately, and over time, John eroded the price of oil and kerosene, sometimes by as much as 80%, in order to strangle competitors. Unsurprisingly, his strategy worked. A major part of what grew the company was that John Rockefeller not only sold refined crude oil, but he also squeezed profits from byproducts like paraffin wax, tar, and naphtha. He also didn't buy wooden barrels from other businesses. He bought a forest and used his own wood to produce barrels to store oil. The revenue kept coming, and Rockefeller made all the small competitors surrender to his authority. But there was one thing that was still bothering him. There were 4 more competitors left, and Rockefeller, who was raised in a crowded household and earned 50 cents a day, wasn't a big fan of sharing. By 1880, he had acquired refineries across the northeastern U.S. and was refining over 90% of the entire country's oil production. This gave Standard Oil a lot of power, and it was able to negotiate lower shipping rates with the railroads. Standard Oil also started buying pipelines and storage facilities, and it bought refineries in other cities as well. It also worked hard to expand its markets in the United States and other countries. In 1881, Rockefeller and his friends put the stock of Standard Oil of Ohio and its other companies under the control of a board of 9 trustees, with Rockefeller as the leader. This was the first major trust in the United States, and it became a model for other monopolies. By 1882, Standard Oil had almost complete control of the oil business in the United States. Now let's talk about how Rockefeller achieved the greatest oil monopoly in history. The origins of history's greatest oil monopoly are actually pretty humble. All it took was one John Rockefeller, who was a determined, ruthless, and pioneering entrepreneur. When he sees an opportunity, he doesn't show mercy to any competitor or competition. This lifestyle was not peculiar to him, as this also is the case with some of the wealthiest people even today. They're relentless and won't settle for anything but the first spot. John Rockefeller bought up all the oil barrels to cause a shortage that crippled smaller companies, orchestrating price wars between wholly owned subsidiaries, forcing holdouts to sell at losses, also secretly bribing legislators. By 1881, John had become so powerful that he could invite the owners of the big rail companies and personally negotiate rebates for using their trains, limiting the number of trains available for shipment by leveraging his close relationship with the railroad companies, purchasing all of the equipment and the equipment suppliers, then refusing to sell replacement parts to holdouts. This practice of negotiating backroom deals really got the business world riled up. At the time, and still kind of today, most industrial goods are transported by rail. Rockefeller Standard Oil gained a state of monopoly in the oil industry by buying rival refineries and developing companies for distributing and marketing its products around the globe. In 1882, various companies were combined into the Standard Oil Trust, which would control some 90% of the nation's refineries and pipelines. By 1890, his company, Standard Oil, was gaining major profits, which he used to buy out competitors. While Rockefeller's offers were usually readily accepted, he had ways of persuading holdouts. What led to the growth of Standard Oil? Standard Oil's aggressive business practices, which many people thought were unfair, and the growing public anger at monopolies, of which Standard was most famous for, led to some states passing anti-monopoly laws. But John was always one step ahead of them. This also led to the U.S. Congress passing the Sherman Antitrust Act in 1890. John sought that moment to build an impressive headquarters for his company on Broadway. This moment was the high point of Rockefeller Standard Oil. He owned 20,000 oil wells, 4,000 miles of pipeline, and employed over 100,000 people. In 1892, the Ohio Supreme Court ruled that the Standard Oil Trust was a monopoly and broke the law. Rockefeller got around this by breaking up the trust and transferring its assets to companies in other states. These companies had interlocking board of directors, so the same 9 men controlled all of them. In 1899, these companies were brought back together into a holding company called Standard Oil Company of New Jersey. This company existed until 1911, when the U.S. Supreme Court ruled that it violated the Sherman Antitrust Act and was therefore illegal. Ida Tarbell, an American journalist, also criticized Standard Oil's questionable business practices in a 19-part series called The History of the Standard Oil Company. This series was published in installments in McClure's magazine between 1902 and 1904. The birth of Standard Trust. After his failure to reorganize the rail industry, Rockefeller decided to restructure a sprawling empire. He and his partners innovated a first-of-its-kind trust where they swapped their individual holdings for shares in the trust. Rockefeller now wielded centralized control and veto power on all of the corporate boards within its conglomerate. The immediate benefits included even lower costs, lower kerosene prices, and standardization across the industry. Rockefeller's company now had the assets and wealth to build pipelines and other infrastructure on a scale that was previously unthinkable. Standard Oil also employed chemists who developed ways of increasing the types and quality of combustible fuels and created methods of converting waste into usable substances. The petroleum coming out of the ground was being refined into various products such as diesel fuel, varnish, and hair gel. As the new products became cheaper to produce, the company increased its global economy of scale. Standard Oil had its hands in many ancillary industries such as iron, copper, steel, and coal, but it also grew in presence in more unexpected areas such as general stores. Rockefeller wisely forced shops to carry his products alone, where he was able to draw on the empire's war chest to slash prices, thereby driving non-compliant shop owners out of business. Standard Oil likewise bought up newspapers to promote its version of events. It also owned its own boats, railroad cars, and warehouses, while manufacturing its own sulfuric acid. But suddenly, John started to lose his grip over the oil industry, both domestically and abroad. What could have happened? If you enjoyed this video so far, then do smash the like button and subscribe to All Money Chronicles for more exciting content going forward. Massive oil deposits had been discovered in Russia and in Asia and were being developed by the Rothschild family, which spared no effort in getting that oil to America. Worse yet, in 1890, the federal government passed the Sherman Antitrust Act, which officially gave politicians the teeth to go after the Standard Oil Trust itself. Of course, the complex legal structure behind all the companies was very difficult to investigate, which is why the government couldn't actually break up Standard Oil until 1911. By that point, however, John Rockefeller had already cashed in and was no longer actively managing the company. The end of Standard Oil. In the final 20 years of his company's existence, it had put out over $500 million in dividends. By some estimates, the true worth of Standard Oil at its peak was $1 trillion, so the breakup didn't really come as a surprise to most people. The end was actually the beginning of acquiring the status of the wealthiest man to ever live. But how? How then did he end up the world's wealthiest man to have ever lived? In 1911, the Supreme Court found Standard Oil guilty of anti-competitive practices and broke the company up into 34 separate entities. Well, John Rockefeller kept his stake in those companies until his death. That breakup was just all that he needed. It turned out to be the most profitable event in his life. Over the course of time, many of those companies merged back with one another. Today, most of the Standard remnants are part of either ExxonMobil, Chevron, or BP, which have since become incredibly large companies in their own right. John Rockefeller's ownership of these successor companies made him the richest businessman to have ever lived, with an estimated net worth of $400 billion. Today, no one has ever beaten Rockefeller in the leaderboard. Not even Jeff Bezos himself seems likely to achieve that. So what eventually became of the legendary John Rockefeller? John Rockefeller made a lot of money from his oil business. He used his money to become one of the most generous donors in history. Driven by a strong sense of social responsibility and a desire to contribute to the betterment of society, he started the Rockefeller Foundation in 1913. This organization is still influential even today. It focuses on education, science, and public health. John Rockefeller's philanthropy has had a deep and long-lasting impact on many people around the world. Through the Rockefeller Foundation, he supported many projects and organizations that have been important in developing different fields. The foundation helped to start the Johns Hopkins School of Public Health, funded important medical research, and supported international education programs. Rockefeller's philanthropy also went beyond the Rockefeller Foundation. Throughout his life, he donated generously to many different causes, including starting colleges, promoting the arts, and protecting the environment. His charitable giving has left a lasting legacy that continues to shape society and improve lives today. Rockefeller's philanthropy balances the more controversial parts of his business practices. He was a complex person who had a big impact on the world in more ways than just the oil industry. His legacy as both a successful businessman and a caring philanthropist is a fantastic example of how great wealth can be used to make the world a better place when it's guided by a commitment to social responsibility and helping others. John Rockefeller's oil empire has had a lasting impact on the global energy landscape. His story is essential to understanding the development of modern capitalism, and the debate surrounding the role of large corporations in society continues even today. So what do you think about the man John Rockefeller, and what have you learned from the rise and fall of his trillion-dollar empire? Do leave your thoughts in the comments section below, as we can't wait to read them. And with that being said, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to Old Money Chronicles for more amazing content going forward. Thanks a lot for watching, and I'll be seeing you again in the next video. Bye for now, guys.